Commanders Nation, get ready because what I have for you today is going to leave you absolutely stunned. Information just leaked that seals the fate of one of our starting safeties, while our smallest cornerback is getting absolutely torched, playing out of position due to catastrophic injuries. And a veteran champion just spilled the brutal truth about Madrid that the NFL doesn't want you to know. We're talking about a desperate front office trying to fix this secondary, players put in impossible situations, and a devastating message that no one heard. If you bail now, you'll miss out on 3 bombshells that explain exactly why this season went completely off the rails. Look, I'm going to be brutally honest with you all. When Adam Peters drafted Quan Martin in 2023, we all thought we had a safety of the future. A guy who could read plays, who had instincts, who was going to be the cornerstone of our secondary for years. And you know what? That future just evaporated into thin air. A fan-sided mock draft just came out that has the Commanders selecting Caleb Downs, the Ohio State safety, with the number 7 pick. And when I read that, I don't see hope. I see a death sentence for Quan Martin. Because let me explain something many people don't understand. When a team drafts a safety in the top 10, they're not doing it for depth. They're doing it to replace someone who just isn't cutting it. And you know who isn't cutting it? Quan Martin, the guy who was supposed to break out this season, is having a disastrous campaign. You're seeing the numbers. You're seeing the tape. You're seeing how they get lost in coverage week after week. And now it turns out that Cody Williams, the analyst who made this mock, says that Downs has versatility and playmaking ability that can instantly transform our defense. I ask you something. Wasn't Quan Martin supposed to do exactly that? Wasn't he the one who was going to transform our secondary? Well, it turns out that after 2.5 seasons, the only thing they've transformed is the way opposing quarterbacks tear us apart through the air. Look at the cold, hard facts. Martin is in the final year of his rookie contract. The Commanders have approximately $100 million in cap space for next season. Adam Peters only has 6 picks in the 2026 draft because they sat on their hands at the trade deadline. And now all the mock drafts have us selecting a safety in the first round. Do you think that's a coincidence? I'm telling you this. That's Adam Peters telling Quan Martin, thanks for your service. But your time here is up. Because when you have limited cap space, when you only have 6 picks, when you're 3-8, and you need to rebuild a defense that is the worst in the league, you can't afford to be sentimental. And here's what really grinds my gears. Quan Martin isn't a bad guy. They're not a bad player. But in the NFL, not bad isn't good enough when you're trying to compete with the Eagles. When you're trying to stop Jalen Hurts. When you're trying to convince Jaden Daniels that this franchise have a future. Caleb Downs from Ohio State is a generational talent. The guy is 6 feet 1 inch, plays like they're 6 feet 5 inches, has instincts that can't be taught, and most importantly, has that killer instinct that our secondary is completely lost. Remember when we had Sean Taylor? Remember the fear they put in opposing quarterbacks? Well, Downs has that same kind of presence. But here's Adam Peters' dilemma. Some are going to say, you can't draft a safety in the top 10. That's a misuse of resources. And I get that argument. Traditionally, safeties don't have the same positional value as elite pass rushers or cornerbacks. But I believe that in the modern game, when you have a truly transformative safety, when you have someone who can play in the box, who can cover slot receivers, who can blitz, who can be your last resort in deep coverage, that kind of player is worth a top 10 pick. And you know why? Because look at what happened to our defense when we lost Cameron Curl. Look at how we fell apart when we don't have a safety who can do multiple things. Jeremy Reeves is a special teams warrior, but they're not a starter. Percy Butler seems more lost than a tourist in the DMV Tyler. Owens is basically a practice squad player who is playing out of necessity. And Quan Martin, the guy who was supposed to solve all these problems, is being exposed week after week. Now I ask you this, is it worth sacrificing Quan Martin's future for Caleb Downs? And my answer is absolutely yes. if that means we finally have a defense that can compete. Because at the end of the day, this isn't about feelings. It's not about giving chances to players who deserve another shot. This is about winning. The Cowboys just paid a fortune for their defense, and they're worse than us. The Eagles have an elite secondary and are dominating the division. The Giants are in a total rebuild, and even they don't have the safety problems we have. How long are we going to be the team that almost makes it? How long are we going to settle for players who have potential? I believe Adam Peters is seeing exactly what we're seeing. They're seeing a defense that urgently needs a leader in the secondary. They're seeing that Quan Martin, no matter how hard we try, isn't that guy. And they're seeing that Caleb Downs could be the piece that finally makes this entire defensive system work. Because here's the truth no one wants to admit. It doesn't matter how many good cornerbacks we have if our safeties can't cover the middle of the field. It doesn't matter how much pressure we generate if quarterbacks can simply throw over the top of our secondary. And it definitely doesn't matter how much offensive talent we have if our defense can't stop anything. So yes, Quan Martin is firmly on the chopping block. Their name is on the cut list for next offseason. And honestly, after seeing how they played this season, after seeing how they've gotten lost in coverage, after seeing how they've missed critical tackles, I can't blame Adam Peters for looking for a replacement. The question now is, will Peters have the guts to do what they have to do? Or will they fall into the same trap as all previous Commanders administrations, giving one more chance to players who clearly aren't up to par? Because if there's one thing we've learned in this city, it's that mediocrity is contagious, and if you don't cut the problem off at the root, it ends up infecting the entire roster. If you thought our secondary's problems ended with Quan Martin, let me tell you about Mike Sainristil. And this is where things get really interesting. Because Sainristil isn't a bust. They're not a bad player. They're a guy who is literally being moved all over the field like a chess piece on a board no one knows how to play. Let's set the context. Mike Sainristil is 5 feet 10 inches tall, weighs 183 pounds. They are the smallest player on our entire roster. And when we drafted them from Michigan, we all knew their size was going to be a concern. But we also knew that the guy has brains, has instincts, has that dog mentality you need in a cornerback. The original plan was perfect. Martian Lattimore and Trey Amos were going to play on the outside. Sainristil was going to move to the slot, where their size wouldn't be a problem, and where their ability to read plays would make them dominant. It was the perfect plan. It was logical. It was exactly what this team needed. And you know what happened. Everything went to hell in a handbasket. Lattimore gets injured. Amos gets injured. And suddenly Mike Sainristil, the 5 feet 10 inch guy who was supposed to play in the slot, is outside covering 6 feet 3 inch receivers who weigh 220 pounds. It's like asking a welterweight to fight a heavyweight. Technically, they can do it, but it's not fair and it's definitely not sustainable. And here's the crazy thing. In the game against Miami at the Bernabeu, Dan Quinn finally decided to move them back to the outside. But not because it was the plan, but because they literally had no other option. And the results were complicated. Let me explain what I saw on that tape. Miami came prepared to run the ball. They used 12 personnel with 2 tight ends, sometimes even bringing in an extra offensive lineman. And Sainristil, playing on the right side of our defense, found themselves matched up against Greg Dulcich, a tight end who had about 70 pounds on them. At first glance, it looked like Sainristil was playing their natural slot position. They were in the box, they were near the line, they were in tight formations. But that is an illusion. Because even though it looked like slot, they were responsible for the outside receiver. And that difference, that small difference in responsibilities, completely changed their aggressiveness in run support. Look, when Sainristil played slot last year, the guy was a missile in run support. They flew to the ball carrier, made tackles, were physical despite their size. But in this game against Miami, they were contained. They were hesitant. They were clearly limited by their outside coverage responsibilities. And here's what really frustrates me. In pure coverage, Sainristil was solid. There was a play where they covered Jalen Waddle, one of the fastest receivers in the league, on a route that crossed the entire field. Sainristil stuck to them like glue, was in perfect position, and honestly, it should have been an interception. But you know what happened. Quan Martin, our safety of the future, missed the tackle after Waddle caught the ball. And instead of being a 5-yard play, it turned into a considerable gain. That is exactly what I'm talking about. Sainristil does their job, does everything right, and still the result is bad because someone else doesn't execute. There was another play where Waddle beat them on a deep route, but Sainristil was in good position. It wasn't a technical error. It was simply a great receiver making a great play. And the only other time they were cleanly beaten was on a short route to Malik Washington early in the game. 2 plays in the entire game where they were beaten. That is excellent for a cornerback, especially one playing out of position. But here comes the tackling problem. And this is what really worries me. Last year, Sainristil missed 7 tackles all season. This year, in only 11 games, they have already missed 6. Their missed tackle percentage went up from 7% to over 10%. And in the Miami game, we had perfect examples of why that's a problem. They missed a tackle against Dulcich early in the game. Okay, the tight end had 70 pounds on him. I can understand that. But then, in the third quarter, Julian Hill absolutely embarrassed them. Literally made them look like a high schooler trying to tackle a grown man. And that is unacceptable no matter the size difference. Now, to be fair, Sainristil also had brilliant moments. In the second goal line stand, they helped Frankie Louvu stop Ollie Gordon the second at the goal line. And then, on 4th down, they were part of the excellent coverage that forced an incompletion. When the game was on the line, when we needed them most, Sainristil responded. But here's what no one is talking about. Late in the 4th quarter, with Jalen Lane out of the game, they put Sainristil back to receive a punt. A guy who has never returned punts in the NFL. A guy who only did it 2 times in college, the last time in 2020. And guess what happened? Muff punt. They gave the ball back to Miami with a golden opportunity to win the game. And honestly, I don't blame Sainristil for that. I blame Dan Quinn and the coaching staff for putting them in that position. What were they thinking? Did they really have no other option? Here's my final breakdown of Sainristil. The guy can play on the outside. They did it against Miami, and in pure coverage, they were fine. But is that their best position? Absolutely not. Is it sustainable long term? Probably not. Is it what this team needs to do out of necessity right now? Unfortunately, yes. And that leads me to the bigger question. What does this say about the state of our defense? When your best cornerback is playing out of position, when your safety of the future is about to be cut, when you're putting a 183-pound cornerback back to receive punts because you have no better options, what does that say about the depth of your roster? I'm telling you this. It says Adam Peters has a ton of work to do this offseason. Because you can't ask Mike Sainristil to be the solution to all your problems. You can't keep moving them all over the field, hoping they magically fix a secondary that is fundamentally broken. The Eagles have Darius Slay and James Bradbury on the outside with Avonte McQuire in the slot. The Cowboys, for all their problems, at least have clarity in their defensive positions. The Giants are in a rebuild, but even they have better definition in their secondary than we do. And us? We're playing musical chairs with our cornerbacks hoping something works. The reality is that Sainristil needs to be in the slot. Period. It's not debatable. But for that to happen, we need healthy cornerbacks on the outside. We need Lattimore to stay healthy. We need Amos to develop. And if none of those things happen, then we need Adam Peters to use that $100 million in cap space to bring in veterans who can play. Because what we cannot do is enter the 2026 season with the same roster, the same questions, the same problems. Mike Sainristil has the talent to be an elite cornerback in this league. But they need to be in the right position, with the right system, surrounded by the right talent. And right now, they have none of that. Okay, now let's talk about the elephant in the room. Or rather, the soccer field in Madrid that was supposed to be this historic experience for the NFL. Because while everyone was excited about the game at the Santiago Bernabeu, while the league was selling this as this great international moment, our players were literally slipping on the field as if they were playing on an ice rink. And here's what I love about Zach Ertz. The guy came out after the game and said exactly what we were all thinking. They told Niti Jatvala of The Athletic that the turf wasn't ideal and that there was a lot of slipping. But then, and this is the important part, they added, you can't blame the field in any way. Do you understand what Ertz just did? I'm going to explain it because this is a masterclass in veteran leadership. They acknowledged the problem, validated what we all saw, but refused to use it as an excuse. Because that's what losers do. They look for excuses. And no matter that we're 3-8, no matter that this season is a disaster, Zach Ertz refuses to be that kind of player. But let's talk about the facts. The field at the Bernabeu was terrible. I'm not exaggerating. I'm not being dramatic. Players from both teams were constantly slipping. There were plays where you saw receivers make their cuts and literally lose their balance. Defensive backs trying to change direction and ending up on the ground. And here's what bothers me. The NFL knew this was going to be a problem. The Bernabeu is a soccer stadium. The field is designed for a completely different sport. The dimensions are different. The type of grass is different. The maintenance is different. And yet, the league decided it was more important to make money with an international game than to ensure the conditions were appropriate for the game. But Ertz is right. You can't use that as an excuse. Because you know what? Miami played on the same field. Tua Tagovailoa had to deal with the same conditions. Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, all their receivers were in the same situation. And they found a way to win. And this is where things get interesting. Because Ertz has been saying this all season. After the loss against the Chiefs, when we fell to 3-5, Ertz told Kevin Patra of NFL.com that there were too many ups and downs, and that the clock is ticking if we wanted to stay in the NFC race. That was 3 weeks ago. And since then, what has happened? We lost against Miami in overtime. We are 3-8. The clock isn't just ticking. Time's up. We're no longer in the playoff race. We're no longer talking about if we can improve. Now we're talking about draft position and which players are going to be here next year. And what kills me is that Ertz saw this coming. The guy has been in the league long enough to recognize when a team is in trouble. They won a Super Bowl with the Eagles. They know what a winning team looks like. And what they're seeing in Washington is definitely not that. But let's talk about the specific game in Madrid. Matt Gay had a chance to win the game in regulation. A 56-yard field goal with 15 seconds remaining. And they missed it. Then, in overtime, they had another opportunity. And they missed it again. Gay spoke after the game with J.P. Finley of NBC Sports and said, "The ball didn't go through. I let my team down today." They added that they missed not one, but 2 kicks that could have changed the game. And they called the atmosphere at the Bernabeu incredible, but admitted that the ending left them pretty down because the outcome was on their leg. And here's where I have to be honest. Yes, Matt Gay missed 2 field goals. Yes, those kicks could have won the game. But you know what? You can't blame your kicker when your offense can't get the ball into the end zone. You can't blame your kicker when your defense allows Miami to convert in critical situations. We held Miami to 16 points. 16 points? And we still lost. Do you know how many teams in the NFL lose when their defense only allows 16 points? Almost none. But we found a way. Because that's what we do. We find new and creative ways to lose games we should win. And here's what Ertz is trying to say without saying it directly. The problem isn't the field. The problem isn't the kicker. The problem isn't a single play or a single player. The problem is systemic. It's cultural. It's this team's inability to execute in critical situations. Ertz talked about too many ups and downs. And you know what I saw in Madrid? Exactly that. We had two incredible goal line stands. Our defense probably played its best game of the season. And yet, when it came time to close out the game, we couldn't do it. That's what separates good teams from mediocre teams. Good teams find a way to win ugly games. Good teams convert those opportunities. Good teams don't let a bad field or a missed kick define their season. But we are not a good team. And the saddest thing is that Zach Ertz, a guy who has seen the best of the best in Philadelphia, has to be here watching this team waste opportunity after opportunity. I believe Ertz's message is clear. No more excuses. It doesn't matter if the field is bad. It doesn't matter if we have injuries. It doesn't matter if we're playing in Madrid or in Washington. You have to find a way to win. And if you can't do that, then you don't deserve to be in the playoffs. The Cowboys are struggling, but at least Jerry Jones is trying to do something. The Eagles are dominating because they have an established winning culture. The Giants are in a rebuild, but at least they have a clear direction. And us, we're stuck in this limbo where we're not good enough to compete, but not bad enough to have a top 5 pick. The field at the Bernabeu was bad. That's a fact. But as Ertz said, you can't blame the field. You have to look yourself in the mirror and ask yourself, did you do everything you could to win that game? Did you execute on every play? Did you take advantage of every opportunity? And the honest answer is no. We didn't. And until this team, from Dan Quinn to the last player on the roster, understands that consistency is not optional, that execution is not negotiable, that excuses are not acceptable, we're going to continue to be exactly what we are now, a 3-8 team that plays in pretty stadiums, but can't win ugly games. So there you have it. 3 news stories that paint the full picture of where the Washington Commanders are right now. Quan Martin with one foot out the door, while Adam Peters looks at Caleb Downs as their replacement. Mike Sainristil being moved all over the field like a chess piece on a board no one knows how to play. And Zach Ertz telling us the truth no one wants to hear. No more excuses. We are 3-8. We have 6 games remaining after the bye week. And the question is no longer whether we're going to make the playoffs. The question is what kind of team we're going to be in those last 6 games. Are we going to be the team that gives up, that looks toward the draft, that starts thinking about vacation? Or are we going to be the team that fights, that refuses to be humiliated, that plays with pride, even if the results don't matter? I want to know what you all think. Do you think Adam Peters should draft Caleb Downs even though safeties traditionally aren't taken in the top 10? Do you think Mike Sainristil can be an elite cornerback if they finally let them play in the slot? And do you agree with Zach Ertz that we can't keep making excuses? Leave your answers in the comments. And look, I know this season has been brutal. I know it's hard to keep watching these videos week after week when the results don't come. But this is our family. This is our community. And no matter if we're 3-8 or 8-3, we're going to be here analyzing every play, every decision, every news story. Because that's what it means to be a Commanders fan. It's not just celebrating when we win, it's sticking with them when we lose. It's demanding more from our team because we know what they're capable of. It's refusing to accept mediocrity because this franchise, this city, these colors deserve something better. So if you're with me, if you believe this team can and should be better, like this video. Subscribe to the channel because tomorrow we're going to have more analysis, more news, more content about our team. And share this video with all the Commanders fans you know, because we need this community to grow, for this family to expand. See you in the next video. And remember, hail to the Redskins.